Today's a great victory. It's a great victory for Sean Combs. It's a great victory for the jury system. You saw that the Southern District of New York prosecutors came at him with all that they had. They're not stopping, but one thing stands between all of us and a prison, and that is a jury of 12 citizens.
Diddy may have been acquitted of some pretty big charges at his criminal trial, but he still was convicted of 2. So what's next for him in terms of sentencing, his finances, facing a wave of lawsuits, including a brand new one from a former exotic dancer who claims Diddy drugged and assaulted him, caused him to lose teeth and have to get gastric surgery?
Diddy is terrified right now, and honestly, this might be the most dangerous moment he's faced since the day he walked into that courtroom. Because the new reports coming out, and these aren't sloppy rumors, these are coming from real legal insiders, say that the judge overseeing Diddy's case is actively reviewing options to extend his prison time.
After the monumental verdict in the Sean Diddy Combs criminal trial, the question now is, what is next for him, right? You got sentencing, civil suits, a lot to get into. So while Combs was acquitted of racketeering conspiracy and the sex trafficking charges that he was facing, he was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution. Currently, sentencing is set for October 3rd. However, there is a hearing set for July 8th where the defense will be arguing for the sentencing date to be expedited, to happen sooner. Obviously, they want that, considering Combs was also denied bail yet again, despite arguments from his legal counsel after the verdict that he should be released on bond. It didn't happen. They want to make sure this happens as quickly as possible. But what will he be sentenced to, really? That's the question. And also, will the government seize his assets? What about all of those civil lawsuits that he faces? Again, a lot of questions, a lot to get into. So for all of this, let me bring on former sex crimes prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, the great Matt Murphy is with us. Matt, good to see you.
Happy to be here, as always.
Got to ask you your reaction to the verdict. Is it what you expected?
Well, hearkening back to, I don't know, we were talking about this, you and I, a couple of months ago, and I got to say, whether it's fun to be right or not in a case like this, we were both right. This was never a good fit for RICO for a lot of different reasons. And the consent element regarding the sex trafficking was always problematic. And I thought the prosecution here did a good job presenting their case. They did a good job presenting their theory. But when you match in a trial context, when you match like professorial and kind of plotting, which is the way a lot of government lawyers are, versus dynamic and engaging and that personality of the defense, it's always a mismatch. You're always up against it. And the Mann Act, like we talked about, I thought he was going down on that after like the second day of testimony. The problem is for the prosecution, the Mann Act is a very old law, and it was essentially legislative morality from about 100 years ago, where it was transporting prostitutes across state lines. The intent may have been good. It was essentially a very early version of sex trafficking, but it was really more an attempt to stop prostitution, which is, as we know, never going to happen. So almost every lonely guy in New York City who's going through a divorce, who is having a problem in the dating pool, who has some sex worker drive over from New Jersey, if he buys her Uber or his Uber, theoretically, that's a violation of the Mann Act. So that is it's not the same type of crime. There's no mandatory minimum under federal law. The judge does not have to. Right. They don't have to. Now, it carries up to 10 years per event. So he faces up to 20 years. The prosecution, I think, is asking for 46 months or something like that. They're asking for far less than that.
If they had called, let's say, Christina Courtroom, okay, this chief of staff who had been mentioned, I think, by almost every witness, and she said, hey, listen, there was a criminal enterprise, okay? We were all a part of it. Everybody knew what the job description was. My job was to do this. His job was to do this. You think they would have gotten racketeering? If they didn't include Jane, who was arguably the more problematic testimony, I mean, Sean Combs still paying her rent, messages that she was setting up a lot of these sexual encounters. Cassie had messages too that were problematic that showed, if we're talking about whether she was a willing participant or not, but if you focus just on Cassie and you didn't call in Jane, or you didn't call in Amia, or you didn't call in a Brianna Bengolan, if you limited the case, and now it's so easy to play.
Not thinking about it. Not casually mentioning it. Reviewing options. That means paperwork is being pulled. That means files are being re-examined. That means legal doors are being checked to see which ones can be pushed open. And Diddy knows exactly what that means. The judge is considering giving him more years. People close to the situation say the atmosphere around this case shifted almost instantly. Something changed behind those courtroom walls. Something serious enough that the judge is revisiting the entire situation with fresh eyes. Not because he wants to, but because new information forced him to. Apparently, investigators dropped new material on the judge's desk. New statements. New connections. New digital evidence. Stuff that wasn't part of the original sentence. Stuff that paints a darker picture. Stuff that makes the judge ask the one question Diddy never wanted to hear. Did we go to
a Monday morning quarterback or armchair lawyer here, but do you feel that the prosecution could have won this case if they structured it differently, if they called different witnesses?
That's a great question, and that's something that these prosecutors will literally be wondering for the rest of their lives, for the rest of their careers. They're going to be wondering if they'd done it differently, would the impact upon the jury and would the result have been different. The fundamental problem, I think, is that this was kind of always a round peg in a square hole. The arson, that domestic violence video that we all watched, that's horrific. All of that should have been prosecuted as state crimes in Los Angeles. That as a fundamental, starting point.
Well, they couldn't
So
do it now. It
basically,
was time barred.
No, of course, the statute is run on everything.
Yep.
But that would have been, he would have been prosecuted for exactly what he did instead of predicate acts into a RICO theory. Now, RICO, as we know, was designed for essentially mafia organization, for organized crime. And the idea is simply because there's a legitimate business, like in The Godfather, they had a legitimate olive oil importing business, and that was but it was still a criminal enterprise. The real thing was the mafia. The real thing was the organized crime surrounding the Corleone family, to use an example that everybody can probably relate to. So simply because their olive oil importing business was legitimate, that's not a defense to a RICO thing. That's the current state of the law. What they did here is they took a business that was always legitimate, Bad Boy Records, that was always and the purpose is to make music and make money. Everything surrounded that. And the defense argument, which they obviously argued very effectively, was that is not a criminal enterprise. So the very first element of RICO has always been problematic from the very beginning. You and I talked about that 2 months ago when this whole thing started. And and the jury, this was a sober jury that the questions were serious and direct. And, they sent that note out regarding juror 25 right at the very beginning saying, hey, this guy's not deliberating. And so this was a serious group. And the Mann Act, they did convict on that. So they were, by the fact that that it was unanimous meant that they were getting along. Federal juries tend to be, in California anyway, we have, they draw our state juries off the DMV database. That's how you get jury duty, is from the DMV. Federally, it's based on voter rules. So it's people who are conscientious enough to actually vote. And you tend to get a more serious class of juror in federal court, which I think is interesting. So to answer your question, it's something that we could kick around for years.
Sure.
But I think the fundamental problem here is that it was always kind of a misfit for a RICO theory. Just like the sex trafficking, sex trafficking requires fraud, force, or coercion, right? So that essentially is the same elements of rape. So you essentially, it's transporting somebody under circumstances that equate to rape. Is something forceful, something fearful. That it just doesn't fit very well here, especially when you're talking about all these people they're orbiting him. They're all trying to advance their own career. And when when the defense attorney got up and said, Cassie got $30 million, as a result of her settlement, right? And that was that
Yeah.
was a big move.
Yeah, I wasn't sold for that personally, because I was like, the prosecution came back and be like, she already settled. What's her incentive to come here and lie? You know, what's her incentive to be a part of this? And that for me, but I think the messages, the conduct that arguably contradicts someone being a victim, and I know there's complicated.
Easy on him? And the moment that question hit the air, Diddy's whole world exploded. Sources inside the prison say he is on edge like never before. He's pacing his cell, he's snapping at anyone who talks to him, and he's constantly begging his lawyers for updates they don't even have yet because the judge is keeping everything quiet. And that silence? That silence is haunting him. Because when a judge is reviewing sentencing options, they do it in total secrecy, they don't announce it, they don't warn anyone, they don't give hints, they just study the evidence, consult legal precedents, and quietly decide if they're going to drop a bomb. And Diddy can feel the bomb coming. Diddy is terrified, and honestly, the panic you're hearing coming from behind those prison walls isn't an exaggeration, it's real. Because the latest reports hitting the industry right now claim that the judge overseeing his case is reviewing options to extend his prison time. Not reviewing the case. Not reviewing paperwork. Not reviewing procedure.
Factors between an abuser and a victim, the trauma. I get it. I totally understand it, but I wonder if that's what saddled the jury. Okay, I want to move past the verdict because now we have to talk about what's happening next. First thing, when the sentencing hearing is going to happen. So they have this hearing next week about whether to expedite the sentencing, happening before October 3rd. If both sides agree, great. If they don't, what is a compelling legal argument for the defense to say, we want this sentencing to happen much sooner?
Well, I mean, we know that behind the scenes, what they want, of course, is they expect a chance that he's going to be released. So that's their big motivating factor, of course. Whether the court abides by that, I mean, it is a substantial change in circumstance. He was acquitted of all of these serious charges, right?
But he was
Like
just denied bail. He was denied bail again.
he was denied bail again, and I watched. I actually learned that on your segment yesterday afternoon as I was sort of
Yeah, yeah.
doing my preparation for this. But the we have to remember that one of the things that he got in trouble for, that Diddy got in trouble for in jail, was using other inmates' calling number. Remember that? So he was calling witnesses in the case from jail using other inmates. That was a direct affront to that judge. That was remember, we had all those attempts at bail that were denied at the very beginning of the case, one after another after another. This judge, and it's the same judge who's going to sentence him, denied that over and over again. And you and I, again, in another conversation we had on your show, we both said he is screwed now, that he's got no chance because he's violating the rules of the court while in jail. So if he's disobeying the rules of the jail and the directive of the court while he's in custody, how can he be expected to actually follow the terms of his of a bail agreement when he's out of custody?
Right, right.
And I think that chicken is coming home to roost again. I mean, I think that's what happened yesterday afternoon. That any judge who has a criminal defendant who behaves like that is an affront to the court itself. It's disrespectful to the
Sure.
court. And it's almost like he couldn't get out of his own way there at the beginning. But he had an excellent defense team.
He does. He does. So assuming for a moment, whenever the sentencing hearing happens, right? Let's say it happens in a month from now. Let's say it has October 3rd. The question is, what's his sentence? As we mentioned, the prosecution in a filing from yesterday talked about the guidelines range being 51 to 63 months. Now, this is before a pre-sentencing investigation and report. Now, the defense, right, they want 21 months. He's already served almost 10. Talk to us about what you're thinking here, because there is no minimum. The maximum's 10. If the judge were to combine it together, like you said, 20 years, feels highly unlikely that would happen. As we're talking, what is a pre-sentencing report investigation? How would it affect this? What do you think the judge is going to do? There's so many different factors to consider here, and it's not like a murder case when it's like, okay, we know what's going to happen. It's like life in prison without the possibility of parole. It's a given. There's room here. What do you think the judge is going to do?
So in federal court, this is actually very interesting. They rely very heavily on those pre-sentencing investigations. So essentially what will happen is there'll be a federal probation officer, and they do these for almost every case, where they will do their own investigation where they'll talk to family members, they'll talk to employers, they'll talk to neighbors, and they will make a recommendation to the court as to suitability for release, suitability for time. And that's something that federal judges traditionally really adhere to. They tend to put a lot of weight on those, far more than they do in state court. The probation department can make a recommendation, but the DA will certainly have more ability, most of the time, to talk a judge in or out of a sentencing recommendation from the probation department. Federal court is different. They really put a lot of weight on those. So that's something that I think is going to be very
Viewing options to add more years. And the moment that information leaked, everything around Diddy shifted. People connected to the situation say this wasn't scheduled, this wasn't expected, this wasn't part of any normal legal process. Something new, something serious, landed on the judge's desk, and whatever it is, it pushed the judge to start evaluating whether Diddy's current sentence is enough. Let that sink in for a second. You're already locked up. You're already facing public humiliation. You're already watching your empire collapse from a tiny concrete cell. And then you hear that the judge is considering adding more years to your time. Sources inside the prison say that when this rumor hit the block, even hardened inmates were talking about it, guards were whispering about it, legal staff were double-checking documents, and Diddy, he broke. They say he's pacing nonstop, snapping at staff, calling his legal team every chance he gets. He knows exactly what this means. Something huge was uncovered. Something
interesting. And a lot of that will come down to what the individuals involved in that investigation, even though it shouldn't impact their professional recommendation. It's really, I think we're going to see what they thought of the case. Did they think he got away with something horrific here? Did they think that he was getting railroaded from the beginning? I think that may reflect in the recommendation to the court. But of course, we don't know what that is yet. Um, I don't know. If I'm his defense lawyer, I'm kind of I don't know if I am pressing the gas on that, trying to make this thing go faster. I mean, it's coming up. It's coming up soon enough anyway. I would want to give them the time and not press them, because you don't want a probation officer or anybody in the federal system to feel like they're being rushed.
Right.
Because I think it's very easy to just go,
Yeah.
okay, screw it, the guy should stay in.
The prosecution made
But
the
those
point
guys just
yesterday.
me.
They said the point, like, we're not ready to give a really sentencing recommendation. We haven't gotten the report. There's people say, well, maybe he'll get time served, right? He's been locked up. There's other people say, no, the judge is going to throw the book at him, even though the judge said yesterday, even though I'm denying him bail and I'm looking at certain conditions, this is not reflective or a preview of what my sentencing recommendation or what my sentence will be. But, are we looking at double digits? Are we looking, you think, at 1 to 5 years, time served? I know it's so impossible to ask, but it is a very specific
Yeah.
charges he was convicted of.
Yeah, we're not looking at double digits.
Okay.
I cannot imagine the court imposing that. And remember, because this law is so old, and we're in an age of Uber. So literally, somebody in New York City, a man or a woman who engages the services of a sex worker who lives in New Jersey, and if they pay for their Uber, that technically is a Mann Act violation. Okay, so that is it. It's a morality crime, and that it just does not carry the same weight.
Will the judge say, hey, listen, multiple instances he was doing it, not one Uber, he was doing it multiple times. You have 2 alleged victims here, Cassie, Jane, and violence, right? He used violence as one of the reasons to deny him bail. I wonder if he's going to look at, even though he was acquitted of racketeering and sex trafficking, different characteristics and components of his relationships with Jane and Cassie and say, this is aggravated.
It's a very interesting question. Can the court aggravate nonviolent offenses that he was convicted of, which are the Mann Act violations? Can he aggravate those when he was acquitted of the more serious charges, essentially acquitted of everything that involved violence, threats, all of that sort of thing? So
Right.
it's a very, very interesting legal question.
Real quick, asset forfeiture. What is that exactly? How would it work with Mann Act convictions?
I just don't see the feds having it being on very strong ground to seize a bunch of assets. And here's why, Jesse. Most of the federal cases where you have, especially RICO cases, it an actual RICO case is an actual corrupt organization that the purpose is, like I had one in Salt Lake City last year. It was a fraud case where it was one of these calling room scam operations. Every dollar that they made in that, they made out of the bank account of some poor innocent victim who
Yep.
got scooped up in their scheme. So every dollar, everything they bought, every car, every house,
Yeah.
everything that they owned was a direct result
Yeah.
of money that they gleaned from innocent people. Those are the cases, or narcotics. We see this all.
Right.
Disturbing enough that the judge is taking it seriously. Judges don't revisit sentencing unless the new evidence is undeniable. It has to be credible. It has to be damaging. And it has to raise the question, did the punishment fit the crime, or did we go too easy? And that question alone is enough to destroy Diddy mentally. Meanwhile, his attorneys are scrambling because they don't even know the specifics yet. The judge is keeping everything sealed while the review happens. That silence is the worst part, because it means the judge wants to work through this without interference. And Diddy can feel the walls closing in. He can't buy his way out. He can't charm his way out. He can't bully anyone. He can't hide. He's fully exposed. Insiders say the new evidence involves previously unreported statements, digital records, and testimony from someone close to him, someone he never expected to talk. And that's what terrifies him the most. Because if someone flipped, if someone provided investigators with enough detail, if someone connected the dots prosecutors couldn't crack before.
All of this, it also doesn't include every allegation that has been asserted against Combs in numerous civil complaints. For instance, there is nothing regarding minors. There's been a lot of allegations that there were minors at these Combs parties, which we had heard before in these other allegations and these other complaints. Nothing about minors here. Now, Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, said that it's possible more charges could be on the way. He wouldn't confirm it one way or another, said nothing's off the table, so we don't know. But maybe there wasn't enough evidence to prove that there were minors at these parties or Combs did anything criminal related to minors. But I tell you what, we did get a lot more information from another filing from the prosecution. I'll get to that in a second. First, I have to get to the defense, because in a letter filed with the court on Tuesday, Combs' defense team laid out a proposed bail package for their client, why he should be released pending trial. And they explained why his actions over the last 6 months point toward cooperation, not avoidance. They also call out the government for seemingly making things more difficult than they had to be. His team writes, quote, "Through counsel, Mr. Combs promptly told the government that he had voluntarily come to New York, offered to tell them specifically where he was, and offered to turn himself in at the appropriate time. Even though Mr. Combs came to New York, authorized his lawyers to tell the government of his location, and offered to self-surrender, the government effected an arrest last evening. This, we know, is the government's right. However, that he traveled to New York to self-surrender is also something the court should consider." So what is this bail package that the defense outlines? Well, here are some of the main points. One, a $50 million bond co-signed by Combs, his mother, his sister, the mother of his eldest daughter, and his 3 adult sons. That $50 million would be secured by the equity in Combs' Miami home. The appraised value of that home on Star Island is $48 million. So in other words, this is what he's saying. You can secure this. You can know that I'm not going to flee the country. I'm not going to break the bail conditions. I'm putting this home up. The defense says that Combs paid off the remaining mortgage, $18 million, so he could use it to secure a bond. The equity in his mother's home in Miami could also be used as collateral. And the letter goes on to say that Combs' travel would be restricted to the Southern District of Florida and the Southern District of New York. Combs apparently surrendered his passport to his attorneys right after the raids on his home, and several of his family members, including his children, have surrendered their passports too. Combs' counsel says he is currently working on selling his private plane, so he wouldn't be able to just jet off to some exotic locale that has no extradition with the United States. In the bail package information, it's also revealed that Combs wants to be under house arrest and would agree to GPS monitoring. The letter from Combs' attorneys also fires back at the assistant U.S. attorneys working on the case, saying they reached out to him in the days before the raids, but never got any reply. And then on March 25th, agents swooped in with a big show of force, which the attorneys insist was unnecessary. The filing also goes into Combs' philanthropic works, including his work with the Boys and Girls Club of America, his donations to open a charter school in New York, and his work fundraising to get PPE for frontline workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. At the end of the document, the defense team states Sean Combs has never evaded, avoided, eluded, or run from a challenge in his life. He will not start now. As he has handled every hardship, he will meet this case head on. He will work hard to defend himself, and he will prevail. Now, the prosecution had a different view. So the prosecution team also sent a letter to the judge defending their assertion that Combs should be locked up with no bail. Their letter states, quote, "As reflected by the gravity of the charges in the indictment, the defendant is dangerous and poses an ongoing threat to the safety of the community. If released, he remains a serious risk of flight despite the conditions offered by his counsel. Most glaringly, the defendant also poses a significant risk of obstructing justice."
Then extending his sentence won't just be an option. It'll be an obligation. Right now, the judge is reading through evidence that could reshape Diddy's entire future, and while nobody knows exactly what decision is coming, there's one thing everyone agrees on. Diddy has never been this scared. He's trapped. He's powerless. And for the first time in his entire career, he might actually be facing the full consequences of everything he tried to outrun. This story isn't slowing down, it's getting darker. Diddy is absolutely terrified right now, and the insiders who leaked this say the energy around his legal situation has shifted from bad to catastrophic, because the latest reports claim the judge overseeing his case is actively reviewing options to extend his prison time. Not possibly. Not hypothetically. Not maybe if something happens later. No, the judge is reviewing right now whether Diddy's current sentence is too light. And that's the kind of news that hits harder than any.
The letter also goes into more detail about some of those specific situations that Combs was allegedly involved in that point to the lengths he would reportedly go to get what he wanted. For example, quote, "The defendant ensured the victims would participate in freak-offs through coercion and violence. For instance, the defendant provided controlled substances, including ketamine, ecstasy, GHB, to female victims so that they could and would continue to engage in freak-offs despite fatigue, physical and emotional exhaustion, and pain. Additionally, both during freak-offs and separate from freak-offs, the defendant subjected female victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse in part to cause them to engage in freak-offs. The defendant hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged female victims, sometimes by their hair. At least a dozen witnesses will confirm that they personally observed the defendant's violence towards women and or the injuries sustained by women at the defendant's hand." Now, back to that 2016 video that I mentioned of Combs allegedly attacking Cassandra Ventura out in LA. They say in this letter, prosecution, they claim that Combs used money and influence to try to keep that video from getting out. Quote, "When a member of hotel security staff intervened, the defendant attempted to offer their hotel security officer a stack of cash to ensure his silence. After the security guard refused the defendant's bribe and after coordination between the defendant and his employees, the defendant's staff contacted other members of hotel security. Within days of the incident, the surveillance video disappeared from the hotel's server." Now, this is the exact allegations put forward by Cassandra Ventura, which makes you wonder, is she one of the cooperating witnesses with the government? You have to believe so. And clearly, there is something to be said that the prosecutors here are believing the account of Ventura and possibly these other alleged victims. It's not just them filing a lawsuit against Sean Combs. They are believing these allegations to substantiate criminal charges. That's big. Now, the letter also references another alleged incident that was first revealed in Ventura's lawsuit last fall when she alleged that Combs set fire to fellow recording artist Kid Cudi's car when he seemed to show interest in Ventura. According to the filing, quote, "In the early morning hours of December 22nd, 2011, the defendant and a co-conspirator kidnapped an individual at gunpoint to facilitate breaking into and entering the residence of individual 1. Multiple witnesses would testify at trial to the events surrounding the kidnapping and break-in, the latter of which is corroborated by police reports and other records. Approximately 2 weeks later, the defendant's co-conspirator set fire to individual 1's vehicle by slicing open the car's convertible top and dropping a Molotov cocktail inside the interior. Police and fire department reports extensively document the arson and conclude that the fire was intentionally set. Multiple witnesses would also testify to the defendant bragging about his role in destroying individual 1's car." So again, prosecutors really taking Cassandra Ventura's allegations as true. And again, while he's not specifically charged with arson, that is a part of the racketeering charge. Goes on, the prosecution, they raised concerns about Combs' access to weapons as well, especially firearms. The letter includes photographs of weapons found in Combs' homes. Again, this is all the reason why they believe he should be denied bail. In March of 2024, during searches of the defendant's residences in Miami, Florida, and Los Angeles, California, law enforcement seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 AR-15s, each with defaced serial numbers, as well as a large-capacity drum magazine. As pictured in a close-up image, the serial number of one of the AR-15s is visibly bored through and obscured. By the way, that in and of itself is a federal crime. We did an episode about the recent potential shooting of former President Donald Trump. That individual
Headline: any accusation or any rumor, because when a judge decides to revisit a sentence, it means one thing. Something new landed on their desk, something serious, something disturbing, something that changes the entire trajectory of the case. And the moment Diddy heard about it, sources say he completely unraveled. People inside the prison said word spread fast, guards whispered about it, inmates were talking about it like it was breaking news. And Diddy? They say he went pale. The reality hit him instantly. He might not be getting out when he thought. He might be staying much, much longer. Reports say he immediately demanded emergency calls with his attorneys. He started pacing nonstop in his cell, snapping at guards, and spiraling into full-blown panic, because he knows exactly what it means when a judge starts reviewing sentencing options. They don't do that for fun. They don't do that by accident. They don't do that without a reason. Prison staff have even started hearing chatter about sentence modifications. Inmates have heard it. Guards have heard it. Word is spreading faster than his legal team can keep up with, and Diddy is sitting right in the middle of it with no control and no escape. Imagine sitting in a cold, cramped cell, already dealing with the collapse of your empire, already facing public humiliation, already losing influence, already being treated like prey in a hostile environment, and then hearing that the judge might extend your sentence. It hits different. It breaks something inside you. People around him say he looks terrified, not stressed, not frustrated, terrified. Because he knows exactly what this means. Someone talked, someone flipped, someone gave investigators something powerful enough that the judge is taking it seriously, and that something must be horrifying, because judges do not reopen sentencing discussions lightly. It has to be disturbing, credible, and deeply incriminating. Meanwhile, prosecutors are practically smiling behind the scenes. This is the opening they wanted. This is the leverage they've been building toward. This is the moment their quiet investigations pay off. And Diddy? He can't do anything. He can't stop the judge. He can't bury the evidence. He can't silence whoever came forward. He can't buy his way out of this one. Right now, he's trapped in a nightmare where his entire future is being decided in rooms he can't enter, by people he can't influence, using information he hasn't even seen. And if the judge decides the new evidence is strong enough, Diddy's sentence isn't just going to stand, it's going to grow. This is the fear he never expected to face. This is the moment he realizes his story might end behind bars.